Michigan is the one that takes the initiative to suspend Jim Harbaugh. So he's, after all, at least for a couple games. Michigan also switches a player's position and two PFF analysts who, if you are longtime watchers or listeners, you know very well, predict Michigan to win the national championship. We'll talk about it all on this episode. Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Monday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And today has been a busy day as far as news coming out, right? So we'll talk about Reece Atteberry's apparent switch to defensive tackle and a couple PFF guys picking Michigan to win the national championship over the weekend. But first, let's talk about the biggest matter at hand, and that is Michigan has decided that it was going to go ahead and get ahead of the NCAA violations ordeal and suspend Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh for 3 games, not 4, but 3. Now, rumor on the street is that the NCAA wanted more, right? They wanted more like 6 or a whole season or all that kind of stuff. But Michigan said, you know what? No, we're gonna do 3. So I'm assuming hoping that they're hoping that they're gonna get some goodwill out of this, right? To be able to, because that's kind of usually how these things work, particularly with secondary violations, which this is they're considering it a primary, a first degree situation because they feel misled because he says he doesn't recall. And clearly, I mean, if the NCAA had actual proof that he didn't recall, that he was lying, this would be done and over with, but it's not. So Michigan put out a release earlier today. This was first reported by Chris Ballas at the Wolverine, but then Michigan gave this release, said the University of Michigan Athletic Department today announced that it is self-imposing sanctions in an ongoing NCAA matter related to its football program. Included in the self-imposed sanctions is a 3-game suspension for head coach Jim Harbaugh to be served during the opening 3 regular season games of the 2023 season. The sanctions are in addition to previously imposed recruiting restrictions, while the ongoing NCAA matter continues through the NCAA process. Today's announcement is our way of addressing mistakes that our department has agreed to in an attempt to further that process, said Ward Manuel, the athletic director. I don't want to do the whole name there. We will continue to support Coach Harbaugh, his staff, and our outstanding student athletes. But the NCAA's guidelines, we cannot comment further until the matter is resolved. An announcement of an interim coaching appointments will be made at a future date. I mean, I would imagine you can say it's going to be Sharon Moore, right? Like, who else is it going to be? Unless they're suspending him too, but they didn't announce that. I mean, he was rumored to get a 1-game suspension. So Jim Harbaugh has also, through a team spokesman, offered a statement. It's literally a sentence. I will continue to do what I always do and what I always tell our players and my kids at home: don't get bitter, get better. Talking to some of the players today, which is why we're doing a 6 p.m. plus Monday episode. Normally we try to do these earlier, and we'll start doing them earlier during the season once we get on a normal schedule. But we talked to some of the players, and they all said the same thing. They actually said, don't get better, get better. And one of the things that they had said, the other things that they had said were like, hey, it doesn't really affect us much, right? He is available for practice, just not in the games. So what does that mean? Right now, I don't think it means anything, because I don't know that it's going to satiate the bloodlust that the NCAA has for this case, to be honest. But I think it's wise for Michigan to get ahead of it, just in case the NCAA finds that it's put adamantium in its spine for no reason at some point mid-season. Or honestly, if you can get through this, because you got to remember next season's schedule. Now, granted, a lot of this stuff is going to change, right? It's not going to be, I mean, the non-conference is the same. It's really the conference of it all. Let's see if I can pull this up relatively fast here. I mean, I don't know if Michigan has a place to, okay, future Michigan schedules. They changed their website. So It won't affect, I mean, they got Fresno State, Texas, week off, Arkansas State next year. Fresno State is August 31st. I don't know that it's necessarily a week off, right? They might have a conference game in there because August 31st, to my knowledge, is just the typical start week of the year next year, I believe. I don't know. Maybe we can we look it up real fast? Yeah, it's the typical start. It's the week, Labor Day weekend next year. So it's not like they're playing week 0 against Fresno State. Those are three, even the two non-conference games, or I mean, they're all three non-conference, but the two group of 5 games, Fresno State has been a pretty good team. Arkansas State has had its moments of being a pretty good team. So I would rather he take this suspension now when Michigan's got the talent to do it. They can go out there and absolutely dominate with you or me head coaching. Try to get it out of the way. I'm curious as to why Michigan decided against Rutgers. Probably because they see Rutgers as more of a threat than any of the other ones. So might as well be as lenient on yourself as possible and hope that the NCAA says, you know what, we're good. I think we're good. But considering the future schedule as it currently stands, which certainly could change and will change to some degree, I'm sure. I mean, 2024, it's Fresno State, Texas, Arkansas State. Yeah, you don't necessarily want to have him suspended for any of those. The next year, New Mexico, whatever. Oklahoma, at Oklahoma, yeah, I probably want him for that. Central Michigan, the next year, Oklahoma again. UTEP is in there. They've had their moments as well. And then it's at Texas, at Washington. So I would say, yeah, get your ducks in a row now. Get this over with when you've got the team that can deal with it. Plus, I think it does have the added benefit of having the team maybe a little bit more fired up, right? Like, this is the result of NCAA being ridiculous. We need to make sure we go out there and play for our head coach. I don't know that they need a heck of a lot of added motivation, but I do think it helps to have some added motivation, especially through a lot of this grind. I think this, honestly, all of this is kind of, I don't want to say win-win, but in some ways it might be. But I guess we'll have to see how the in-game coaching goes. This could be Sharon Moore and or Jesse Minter's, it could be their audition. It's kind of like what happened for Ryan Day in 2018. So I'm assuming that that's what that's going to be. All right, let's move on, because I think that we've plowed this ground a lot in general. So he's got his 3 games. What more are we going to say about it? I do think we should talk about this Reece Atteberry stuff. We should talk about PFF. We have time. We'll move on to some ESPN stuff. If not, we'll do that tomorrow. But we'll get to all the things that we can today. Before we do that, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you've got the access to the best qualified candidates available. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. That's why you have to check it out. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And guess what? It's super easy to find yourself in their portal, creating your job posting. It's so easy that a caveman can... No, I don't think I can do that. It's so easy. It's just so easy. So once you do that, add the purple hashtag hiring frame and letting everyone know that you are indeed hiring. It helps you spread the word. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills, experience, and all of that, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. Just like Michigan has dipped into the transfer portal to find its Ernest Hausman, its Ladarius Henderson, its Drake Nugent, you can dip into your own transfer portal and find the right person to bring in to help you win your own company's national championship. That's the power of LinkedIn Jobs. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the best qualified candidates, and they help you do so faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, let's continue on. We have plenty to talk about here. especially because I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off on Friday with press conference, and I don't even remember what else. Hence no Friday. Friday episode was supposed to be Saturday, and then I was doing the same thing on Saturday, just not with the press conference. I don't remember what I was doing, and then Sunday was just the day of the Sabbath. We just rested. We did no work whatsoever, and it was everything that I thought it could be. Anyway, so let's discuss. Reece Atteberry was pictured. I believe the tweet went out this morning from Michigan football, and some eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed that Reece Atteberry, considered to be one of the 12-ish guys that could start on the offensive line at any point, was playing on the defensive line. So that was news, because he's not someone that was mentioned at all as being that guy. Normally we hear about these things, of course, but according to Kenneth Grant, who we spoke to this afternoon, that this was done about a week ago. Here's what Kenneth Grant had to say. He came into the room, like a week ago? That's it. That's all he said. No, I'm just kidding. He's doing really good. I think he said he played D-line in high school, but he's already moving up on the depth chart. He's doing really, really good. He's just learning. He's very smart in the meeting room. He knows the concept of the defense and how to run the defense. He just has to work on little things technique-wise. I think that's interesting because that just adds extra to what Michigan's offensive line is significantly deeper than the defensive line, right? The defensive line, I think we have a lot of high expectations for, but yet when I look at a lot of different things, I'm not seeing like AP All-Americans and everything. Chris Jenkins is probably going to be, a first round draft pick, and yet, he's not a first or second teamer preseason All-American at defensive tackle. He's not on ESPN's top 100 list. But yet we look at Chris Jenkins, and a lot of other people look at Chris Jenkins and say that's insane. He's certainly got that talent. He's got a lot of things. He might not be that big name, but he's still really, really good. So, but you've got him as the proven commodity to some degree, but yet not getting the accolades. Yet there's a couple guys there that are only semi-proven that people are excited about. Rayshon Benny, Mason Graham, the aforementioned Kenneth Grant. Cam Good is a guy who keeps on getting mentioned. And then Jim Harbaugh even mentioned the three freshmen, Trey Pierce, Etta, and Cameron Brandt. So, I mean, while it seems like a lot of depth, it's not a lot of proven depth. And Reece Atteberry, a senior, who, behind Trevor Keegan and Zach Zinter, probably not going to see playing time. This is a quick way to get on the field. So I think it's a really smart move. And because it's one of those things, like, he knows what the game of college football is like. He's played in some tight spots. I believe he played a bit in the Nebraska game 2 years ago. He's had some moments where he's had to get into the game. He's got some experience. Might not be as heavy as some others, but they've always spoke very highly of him. He's been behind a lot of different guys, and they've moved him a little bit. He was supposed to be the center of the future, and then they made him a guard again. So there's a lot there to try to figure out. But at the same time, I think he's really figuring it out. I'm also distracted by Zuri, who, by the way, as I was uploading audio to the AI thing, I put Zuri outside just for like 10 minutes. Just put her out on the chain. Like, I better go check on her, go out the back. And I just see a collar laying there. She had slipped out of her collar, so... thankfully, she was 2 houses down. I don't know how long she had been over there, but I'm still having a mini heart attack here. So hearing her just makes me happy. And anyway, I digress. That's the second time that something crazy like that has happened. The other one was a couple weeks ago. Sarah came over. And we're saying hi to each other and everything, and she comes in, sits down. I go get her a Coke from the fridge and just give it to her. I sit down. I'm just sitting there, and it's like we're talking, and I'm like, I don't hear the little pitter patter of like, why is Zuri would normally be jumping on her and stuff. I'm like, wait, where's the puppy? Where did she go? I go outside, and she's just standing at the front door. Like, thankfully, there's no trains because that puppy wants to chase a train so bad. So thankfully, again, thank the Lord that there was no train. Anyway, I digress. That's why my mindset wandered there for a minute, because I'm hearing her in the other room just doing whatever it is that she does. All right, we're back to Reece Atteberry. I think that this is the best way for him, a guy that has been highly spoken of, a guy who has a lot of potential. I know he's a 3-star from Colorado, but Michigan's had pretty good recognition. I think he's the type of guy that if it wasn't for all the transfers, if it wasn't for all the depth, he would be starting and everyone would be fine on the offensive line. But I think that when you look at position switches, Michigan, Jim Harbaugh has done a really good job when it comes to being able to move guys like that, right? Done an incredible job, especially lately. Now, we'll find out if Amarian Walker is a guy that works. Kalel Mullings, I know people are upset about the college football playoff, but I mean, he did help you out at the running back position in the last 2 other games, right? Ohio State. I mean, he threw a pass, incredible pass that everyone loved to Luke Schoonmaker. No look, just was out there going Kobe. And then obviously ran for, I think it was a 2-point conversion or it might have been a touchdown. I think it was a 2-point conversion, though, in the Big Ten championship game. But so far, so good there. Obviously, you got guys like Mikey Sainristil still to address it. He wants to be called Mikey, right? Or that is his name, Mike, but it's Mikey. That's how it's supposed to be said. We just learned that last week, by the way. I know we've called him Mikey here and there, but it's not. That's actually his name. He doesn't mind being called Mike, though, so we'll probably still oscillate between the two. Obviously, great position switch, if for no other reason than the one play, but he did a lot more than the one play against Kate Stover in the Ohio State game. Jabril Peppers played a multitude of positions, right? Like, we've seen a lot of these players move. Chase Winovich played a multitude of positions before he settled in at defensive end. So it'll be interesting to see, because usually they've got a better track record of these things working than when they don't. We'd all like to forget about Ben Mason being a 3-tech, but I'd rather have more big bodies that can come in and cycle through, because on offensive line, you're not going to be cycling through. This gives him an opportunity. I think it's great. Let's move on to the next matter at hand, and that is PFF and who they think is going to win the national championship. Spoiler alert, it's Michigan. We'll talk about that in a moment. All right, this should come as probably only light surprise, but Max Chadwick, who appeared on this very show some time ago, I mean, it was early as I had moved in here, so it was at least in April. I think it was probably sometime in April. He had come on and said, listen, I'm a Penn State fan, but I've got a million things to love about Michigan, and I think Drake Nugent's going to win the Remington Award trophy. I think that Michigan's going to beat Ohio State again. I think that Zach Zinter is going to be the first offensive lineman to win the Heisman Trophy. Okay, he didn't say that. I'm making that last part up. The other 2 things he did say, I believe, if I remember correctly. I don't remember what happened clearly Friday, Saturday, and half of Sunday, but I know some of these things he said. I'm pretty sure he also had said at that time, listen, I think Michigan's going to win the national championship. You put that in writing, though. Because it's one thing when you sit here and you say it. It's another thing when you say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put that out there for all the world to see, instead of just people listening to a hyper-local, hyper-regional podcast, right? But he joined another guy who, if you've watched or listened to this show at any length, then you've seen Trevor Sikkema, Tampa Bay Trey, come up here and say different things about Michigan throughout the years as part of our PFF crossover. Now both of them are saying Michigan's going to win it all. Max Chadwick has Michigan beating Florida State in the final, and Trevor Sikkema has Michigan beating Georgia in the final. I'd rather Michigan play Georgia and win. The caveat, and win, than Florida State, but I mean, either could be exciting. You'd like to get some revenge about the 2017 game, even though Michigan did not care to be there at all. Well, 2016 game, actually. You'd much rather that. But anyway, I think that's interesting. What I also think is interesting is that he neither had more than one Big Ten team out there. I think that's kind of surprising. It's just kind of given how people think of Ohio State and how people think of Penn State. I with Penn State right now, I just feel like they're a lot more challenging. But people are talking about Penn State's offensive line like, oh, that's one of the best offensive lines in the country. I want to know where that's coming from, because that has been the constant weakness for James Franklin. I think people are looking at Olufashunu and saying, yeah, it's because of that guy. You're only as strong as your weakest link. As far as what I saw in the Penn State spring game, still looked to be an issue, right? Still looked like it was an issue. Ohio State's having all sorts of problems, apparently. Reports, you see it on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, of just offensive line not really kind of coalescing, quarterback battles. Still, Ryan Day was supposed to name a starter, hasn't yet. Apparently they've underwhelmed, but Devin Brown has been a bit better than Kyle McCord. But it feels like a team, like the way that they're being spoken of, that it kind of feels like when a team like that ends up not being that good. I feel like Ohio State will go out and look really good against Indiana, look really good for the first couple games, and then face Notre Dame. And now I said like literally a week ago to somebody like, oh, they're gonna go out there and throttle Notre Dame. Now I'm not so sure. I don't know that I want that either, because I just don't want Notre Dame to win, because I don't want their heads to get too big either. I still root against the rivals, folks. I still root very heavy against the three rivals. I do. I can take the Michigan fandom out of me. Right? If Michigan loses week 1, whoa. I'll be like, all right, cool, whatever. I mean, I won't be completely cool with it, because that will make covering the season a lot less fun. But the rivals, I still want to see the three not do so good, personally. Anyhow, but both of them picked Michigan as the only Big Ten representative. Both of them picked Michigan to win the national championship. If you have watched or listened to a lot of these PFF episodes, they've had some prescient thoughts when it's come at least to Michigan. Anthony Treese used to come on here and be like, listen, Michigan, coming off of games in which everyone's freaking out about whatever Michigan, coming off of what was it, Rutgers in 2021? Everyone's freaking out, and he's like, well, Michigan's going to go in and beat Wisconsin. That's happening. I think it was earlier than that, because people were kind of getting wise to the fact that maybe Wisconsin wasn't as good as people thought it was going into that 2021 season. It was looked at like Penn State, Wisconsin was for battle for number 2 best team in the Big Ten. But Anthony Treese said at an early spot, like, listen, Michigan's going to go in and throttle Wisconsin. That's what's happening. That's what's up. People are like, what? No, that's ridiculous. They go and do exactly that. He's like, listen, I think Michigan might be the team to beat in the Big Ten. Everyone's like, no, it's got to be Ohio State, who ended up being right. Trevor Sikkema's given similar insight. Max Chadwick, who we've only talked to once, super high on Michigan. They've got a track record at PFF, at least on this show, for coming on and saying things that a lot of people might think is ridiculous at the time, and they end up being accurate. So we'll find out. They play games for a reason. That's basically the motto of this show. But I still look at the field, and it's like, yeah, some teams are going to rise up that no one thinks about. That happens every year. Some teams are going to underachieve greatly. That also happens every year. Ohio State feels like the one most likely to be that kind of Clemson of the last couple of years, right? Like where it's like, oh, they're still good, but they're not going to win a national championship. Some of the teams are who we thought they were. Michigan just feels like they are who we thought they were. I feel like there are a lot of teams that are not known commodities that people feel are known commodities. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State. Maybe. Possibly. Alabama hasn't been full Alabama in the last 2 years. Georgia is basically turned over the bulk of the teams that won the championship at least 2 years ago. And lost your starting quarterback. We'll find out if Carson Beck named the starter, if he ends up being that guy. Texas. A lot of people are loving to pick Texas right now. They've got a ton of talent. Texas has often had a ton of talent. Difference is probably the quarterback situation. We'll find out if that has turned out to be as good as advertised. Florida State, are they there? I don't know. Max Chadwick seems to think they are. Man, they had one good year after having had a lot of not good years. I don't know if they're back or not. LSU, maybe. A lot better than people thought last year, but they were still, a 4-loss team? So Michigan is the most stable. That's why I bring up all these other teams. Michigan lost the least amount. Well, they lost a lot, but ultimately are bringing back the most returning talent. And it's fun when you go down those lists of, you see the Big Ten network. Oh, they got 7 returning starters on offense. Well, they actually have more than that. Because some of those guys started half the season, started the tail end. They have the starting experience. They might not be day one starters from a year ago, but they were starters. Then they bring in a bunch of other guys who were starters elsewhere. A.J. Barner, Ladarius Henderson, Drake Nugent, Miles Hinton. Other side of the ball, same deal. You have guys who have starting experience. They might not have been day one starters, like Michael Barrett ended up being a starter by the end of the year, but it wasn't necessarily a day one starter. Right? But they bring in an Ernest Hausman. They bring in a Josh Wallace to bolster that group. Michigan's the most stable of everything. For me, it's Michigan versus its own mentality than anything else. Stay humble, as that's always the smart and important thing to do. If you stay humble, don't think of yourself as all that like they thought, we thought going into that TCU game. They have a chance to do some big things. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We'll be back on Tuesday with, we'll talk about some things that ESPN said. They've got a bunch of different preview article type stuff here. Hopefully we won't lose Zuri this time. Zuri, you want to come and say hi to the people on the video on the podcast? Look, she's got her collar back on, if you can see that. And it's a little less loose. Not choking her still, but a little less loose so that the puppy doesn't get lost again, because that was a scary moment, wasn't it? Yeah, she doesn't know. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon. Peace.